All right. So, hello, I am Dr. Raquel Daly, and thank you so much for joining us on the Best Life Abroad podcast. Today, we will be speaking with Harry, who relocated to Brazil, and he is going to share his insights and tell us all about his journey to moving to Brazil. So, welcome, Harry. Thank you so much for joining the Best Life Abroad podcast. Tell us a little
Thank
bit
you.
about yourself and how you began just the idea of moving abroad.
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I am from South Carolina. I am from rural South Carolina, actually. So I am from the country, from the South and from the country. And so I've always had an interest in culture, but because I was from rural South Carolina, I had no way of sort of like exploring that or diving more into it. Particularly, it was Latin culture that I was interested in, and I was in when I arrived to college, UNC Charlotte. I remember meeting somebody in the residence hall whose family was from Puerto Rico, but she was Black. And well, her dad was Puerto Rican, but she was Black. She was as Black as me. And so it really I was shook because I was like, okay, because I had not seen the concept of Black and Latin yet. That wasn't that my mind had not conceptualized it yet, but it really piqued my interest. And so then I really started to like, okay, this Black and Latin thing is a thing, and I want to learn more about it. But in
Mm.
undergrad, because I majored in meteorology, and so my focus really was I need to get through these classes. I want to
Mhm.
go abroad, but I'm an out of state student, and so I need to focus on keeping my stuff together at UNC Charlotte so I can finish. And so I never went abroad to a Latin American country, although I wanted to.
Mhm.
And so once I graduated from UNC Charlotte and I went to Houston, Texas for AmeriCorps, my roommates were of Mexican descent. And so then I got reintroduced to like Latin culture via living with them. And then I started realizing that, okay, living in Texas, there's this large Hispanic population. There is Hispanic music going on all the time. I'm listening to it in the car. So then I decided to start learning Spanish, like because I love languages. So I just started learning Spanish in 2013 in Houston because of that, and because I worked for a college access program, and a lot of the first generation
Mhm.
college students were also from families whose first language is Spanish. So all of that influenced my language learning. I mean, experience. All of those experiences influenced my desire to go abroad. So when I arrived to graduate school at Louisiana State University, I decided that I wanted to finally do an exchange program. And I did my exchange program in Colombia the summer of 2014. I mean, yeah, the summer of 2014. And that was the life-changing experience for me to be
Mhm.
abroad. And it also helped to for me to improve my Spanish. And then from then on, I came back the next year with that program, went to Ecuador, continued to improve my Spanish, graduated from LSU, started working in Washington, D.C., which is now I'm in this international city. And when
Mhm.
I arrived to DC, I made a goal for myself. And that goal was that by the time that I was 30, I wanted to live abroad somewhere in Latin America, somewhere. Had no clue where it was going to be at, but I was in love with Colombia. So I was like, I'm going to be in Colombia, Colombia. Right. But when I moved to DC, because I had a proficient level of Spanish by this time, I decided to transition to learn Portuguese. And
Mhm.
so that's when I started getting more into Brazilian culture, was when I started going to language exchanges in DC and started trying to learn Portuguese via Duolingo.
Mhm.
And then my third year in DC, I decided to apply for the Fulbright program.
Mhm.
And I applied for Fulbright and got it to go to Brazil. And
Mhm.
so this was, and I left for Brazil in 2020, but the pandemic happened. And
Uh-huh.
so then I got sent back home. And
Mhm.
so then what did I do in that spare time? I decided to reapply to Fulbright because I was home and jobless during the pandemic, right? I
Uh,
got sent home. So I applied again, went through the whole entire application process.
mhm.
And I got it again. And that is how I came to Brazil for this year in 2022. And I've been here since April, and I've been enjoying the experience ever since. It's been a great experience, but it hasn't always been an easy experience. And even though
Mhm.
I'm here with my through a government funded program, right?
Mhm.
But still there's some nuances, there's some things that I wasn't expecting. Given
Mhm.
that I've already learned a lot about the culture, right? It wasn't like I was coming
Mhm.
in blindsided because I had already visited Brazil several times before. Rio, Salvador, the black capital of Brazil,
Mhm.
Sao Paulo. So these places, been to Carnival several times.
Mhm.
So I was prepared, but I wasn't prepared. So that's how
Mhm.
I came to Brazil.
I love that. So I love that, like your journey started with languages. You know, I'm a language person. So I love that,
Yes,
like, it was like, these languages, these people.
right,
And that's like what
right.
led, yeah, I love that. And so tell us about it. Like you said there, like you didn't expect everything, even though you were like well versed in the culture and already been there. What were some of the things that you were like, I wasn't really expecting this?
Um, First of all, the heat. I knew I lived in
Yeah.
Colombia. I lived in Colombia for the summer, so I know it gets hot, and I
And you're from South
recognize that.
Carolina.
But I'm from South Carolina, but
Mhm.
it's the access of air conditioning, access to air
Yeah.
conditioning, and we're so spoiled in the United States that we just like use
Yeah.
electricity like it is nothing.
Yeah.
And so here in Brazil, especially in the Northeast, it's really, really hot. And so I'm like in my apartment and I'm just sweating. And
Mhm.
like even with and I have to have the fan on. And even if the fan is not on, I may still sweat. I have the fan circulating. The fan is directly on me. I don't do that circulating fan. Like, no, I need all the air on me. Um, and so it's just been that, when you go out and you're just sweating profusely, walking
Yeah.
out, and in Latin America, like in the hot country, like people are taking baths like several times. You get home from being outside, you take a shower. You
Mhm.
about to go out, you take a shower. It don't be long
Mhm.
showers. It'd be like, just enough to get that sweat off your skin,
Uh-huh.
get that sweat off your skin and move.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so that's one thing. And then
Mhm.
also like perceptions of what like here in João Pessoa at least of what um poverty looks like because that I know that there is such a lot of in Brazil there's lots of poverty across the country, a lot of inequality because people who are rich really are rich and then the
Mhm.
people who are poor are poor. So because I've been here the last time and then I'm coming here now after the pandemic, or as the pandemic is ending,
Mhm.
and now I'm seeing more people on the streets than I did before, right? And so,
Mhm.
that was something that was like, oh, like
Wow.
I don't remember that being that many people on the streets before in this city,
Mhm.
which is a very calm city compared to other cities in the northeastern region of Brazil where I'm located.
Mhm.
And so that was another thing.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
as well as the neighborhood that I live in, which is all of the students who I work with, they're like, "Oh, you live in the nicest or the richest neighborhood in João Pessoa," and I'm like, "Well, it looks pretty normal to me."
Uh-huh.
Uh, perceptions of like what is rich and what is not, and for me, becoming from
Mhm.
my American privilege, which I do recognize that as well, that
Mhm.
this neighborhood to me doesn't look like a rich neighborhood. It looks like a regular, normal neighborhood that one would live in. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But for Brazilians, their perception that this is a very like posh, neighborhood, considering that it is right next to the beach as well.
Mhm.
I'm so dealing with that as well, and then also other cultural nuances. Having to deal with sometimes like Brazilians not being as reliable
Mhm.
as one would what I'm used to.
Mhm.
And it just depends. It depends on the relationship that I have with the person. But if I'm just meeting someone, of course not really. But I just, as someone who's from the United States, we have a thing about like if somebody tells you they're gonna do something, then they're gonna do it, like about keeping your word. And it's not
Mhm.
like they don't want to do that, but it's just that their culture is that we're gonna be nice. we're going to be nice. We're not going to tell you no, we're going to tell you maybe, you know? And so when you tell
Uh-huh.
me a maybe, I'm like, a maybe for me is a possibility of
Hmm.
that, yes, you know? But for
Hmm.
Brazilians, when they're telling you maybe, it's a
That
no.
means nah. Okay.
Maybe is no. Because so
Okay.
different cultures like that. And yeah, those are some of the little nuances
Hmm.
that I've kind of like dealt with. So not too
Yeah.
much, not too hard.
Yeah. That's so that's so interesting. And I think the last time that I talked to you was 2020. You had
Yeah.
just come back from Fulbright and you were at home
Yes.
thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you told us like you made this decision, you're gonna go ahead and move, and you reapplied for your Fulbright. So can you tell us about like for those who might be interested in Fulbright, can you tell us about kind of what the Fulbright process is? And even also typically one of the main questions that I get is like, how will I make money while I'm abroad? If you can, if you feel comfortable, if you can touch on that too.
Definitely. So I think that the Fulbright program is an exchange program between the United States and several countries in the world. So there are multiple countries that have agreements with the United States, and so the Fulbright facilitates is an exchange program. And so the program that I'm a part of is the Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship Program, and that is where Americans travel or live abroad for about 9 months and teach English in countries across the world where they have this agreement. But it also means that depends on the country that they send citizens of that country to come to the United States to teach maybe French, maybe Spanish, maybe Portuguese in the case of Brazil. But also not only language teaching, but Fulbright also facilitates scholarship and research. And so there are Americans that are going to different countries to participate in research. There are professors that are going to other countries to perfect their own research or do or investigate a new research topic, and vice versa. There are folks from these other countries that are coming to the United States to either study undergraduate, master's degree, or doctoral programs, and as well as to do research, or they could be visiting professors that are sponsored by Fulbright as well, to work at different universities as well. And so it's all about diplomacy and
Mhm.
facilitating those cultural exchange. And so that's a little bit about Fulbright. And Fulbright does provide sort of like a stipend for those who are who participate in the program, and so that is a positive thing. But also for those of us who have the ability to work remotely as well, and remote jobs are now very much in style than they were before the pandemic. I think that
Mhm.
that's how a lot of folks are earning money. At least I know some folks that are abroad now, and I have some Americans that I met in João Pessoa, as well as a friend that I have that is also from UNC Charlotte, that they are working remotely. They're working remotely, and they're digital nomads essentially, right?
Mhm.
And earning money. And I think that that's the new trend of being a digital nomad. And
Mhm.
so my goal, hopefully one day, is to be a digital nomad, because of course with the Fulbright ending, I have to return, but with the knowledge that I have, and of course knowing that there are plenty of opportunities for virtual work, my plan is to return abroad eventually to continue the life of being a digital nomad, because I really value this sort of lifestyle in a way that I just enjoy the adventure of being
Mhm.
in some place different and getting to know new people. Of course, it can be lonely. Like, I'm not going to say that
Mhm.
this is a lifestyle of like, oh, I'm just traveling all the time and everything's all gravy. But I recognize that there are some moments where I have felt like loneliness,
Mhm.
and wanting like real deep connections from folks.
Mhm.
Sometimes a language barrier can
Mhm.
prohibit those deep connections. So,
Mhm.
but good thing I do speak Portuguese. But even though there's still nuances in
Yeah.
that communication, that sometimes the connections are not as deep as they could be, as if I were somebody that was speaking in English. And don't get me wrong, my Portuguese is really, really
It
good.
sure
So
is.
it is really, really good, but still there are certain things like that. But that's the trend. Honestly, that's the trend.
Mhm.
And depends, because English teaching used to be the thing back in the
Yep.
day. It was just like going abroad, teach English somewhere at a school, or for folks, because English is a hot commodity. We all know about globalization and
Mhm.
folks wanting, and depends on the country, right?
Mhm.
English teaching can be very lucrative. In Latin America, not so much a
Mhm.
lucrative field, but of course, in Asia, of course, folks I know that have got and have in the Middle East and Dubai, I believe they've have earned lots of money in those countries.
Mhm.
But I would say digital nomad is the way to be. It
Mhm.
is the way.
Yep, it is the wave. And do you know what the other people are doing who are the digital nomads? Like, what are they doing digitally?
I know one of my friends. I don't know what company that she works for, but I
Mhm.
do know that she's always in another country. So she was in Latin America, she was in Colombia, Ecuador, and she was doing Peru. She came to
Yes,
Brazil and spent some time here, and then she went to Europe and she was in Greece and doing all
yes,
over. Then she went back to the States, and now she's back in Latin America now. I saw her in
yes.
Colombia, and she went to that. And then the other guy that's American here in João Pessoa, I didn't ask him what his specific role that he was doing.
Mhm. Oh, yeah,
But
that's okay.
I remember he was saying like he was working for a company from the United States, which is João Pessoa. Actually, Brazil created a list and would say that this would be a top city for digital nomads because it has a relatively um, cheap cost of living. The beach, yeah, like I live in a neighborhood that's right by the beach. The beaches in the northeastern Brazil are some of the most beautiful in the whole entire country, and it's really a calm place, like I mentioned to you before. Like
Mhm.
at nighttime, and when we talk about Brazil, that's also one thing I forgot to mention. Security situations, security, like safety is a thing. Like petty theft is
Mhm.
a thing. Robberies are a thing, right? Gang violence is a thing. But here in João Pessoa, like people are walking along the beach at nighttime on the area where I am, and it's a thing. Like
Oh,
they're here all week long, right? In the evening time.
wow.
And that's unheard of in the northeastern Brazil because once nighttime hits, once it gets dark, listen, we not on nobody beach at nighttime. You know what happened when you go on the beach at night?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So so that sets João Pessoa apart from other places. So she cost of living
Yeah.
relatively safe. You can
Yeah.
enjoy a good life here.
Wow, I love that. And so with Fulbright, I didn't know with Fulbright you can like pick the location where you'd like to be. Do you have like a top
Mhm.
three? How did you end up being able to be in Brazil?
In Brazil, so I was able to choose the country. So if with
Okay.
Fulbright, yes, so for Fulbright ETAs, we are allowed to choose the country, and we have to apply for the process for applying. We have to talk about why we want to come to this particular country and
Okay.
how are we going to be an effective, how we're going to use our grant, right? Like how are we
Hmm.
going to teach English at least. And so I did not choose this location as in the city that I'm in, but I
Hmm.
did choose the country. And so the first round is reviewed by Fulbright staff, or not Fulbright staff, but the committees within the United
Hmm.
States. I believe they have specific country committees in the United States that review the applications, or maybe they just review the application just to make sure that they're good and decent. And then afterwards, they forwarded these applications to their respective, if the country, the país, if the country has a commission, for example, Brazil has a Fulbright commission, and so they forwarded those applications to the Brazilian Fulbright Commission, and they then choose who they would like to come to Brazil. So other
Okay.
countries have similar processes.
And then the commission also picks like the city or do
They did. So
okay.
they picked the city for us. They did, but they gave the new grantees that are coming. I've heard through the grapevine because the ETAs love to gossip. Ooh, they just love to gossip. WhatsApp, and we in these group chats. Ooh, they just love to
Ah.
gossip. And so and because some of they found Fulbrighters that are making TikToks, Americans who are coming to Brazil who are making TikToks about their experience applying for Fulbright,
Mhm.
and so they've been watching the videos, and so they've had the opportunity to choose their top five
Oh.
cities now
Mm.
versus us who were just placed. But you know, you got to do different things because sometimes folks are because Fulbright places us in cities and some places in rural areas as well. And so
Mhm.
some people have better placements than others, right? Like I'm in a nice city, so and then some people are just in the country, right? And so
Mhm.
it's about expectations. It's
Mhm.
about these sorts of things. So you know, in a quest to satisfy our new generation of students,
Uh-huh.
satisfy the new generation because if you don't give them options, you know, then they're going to be their expectations will be up.
Yep.
They will be upset because they didn't get where they wanted to be at,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And I also understand that here in Brazil we have similar racial dynamics as the United States, and
Mhm.
also where you are in Brazil and what you identify as does affect your experience mightily.
Mhm.
So that is important to know too as well. So I will
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah, that's perfect segue into my next question. So, um, are there any, I know you said that you do speak Portuguese very well. You are also familiar with the culture, which is awesome. Are there any aspects of your identity that you feel have not been like accepted or that you've had to stifle at all being in Brazil?
No, not really. I think Brazil, I don't feel like I've had to stifle any like parts of my identities at all being in Brazil. I'm in the Northeast, and so it's a very liberal sort of
Mhm.
area, would you say, when it comes to certain sort of like liberties. For instance, in João Pessoa, they have signs in every restaurant that says like discrimination against sexual orientation is not allowed, right? And so I was
Wow.
like, when I first got here, I was just like, oh, that's not in other parts of Brazil, like in the southern parts of Brazil,
Wow.
but in a lot of the restaurants, they have sort of like this sign to talk about like discrimination against
I
sexual
love that.
orientation is prohibited. And so I was like, it's cool. We're up here in a progressive part of the country, and also the northeastern part of Brazil also are the ones that are more likely to vote for Lula because we're in election season in Brazil.
Mhm.
And so that the first round occurred the first in like the end of September. And so now we have in a week and a half, I guess, we'll have the second round. And so we'll see whether Bolsonaro stays or Lula wins. Um,
Mhm.
but it's a very much Lula focused region because of, you know, it's just very liberal. The Northeast has this connotation of being a little bit more underdeveloped and poorer. But that's because the southeastern region of Brazil has all the resources. You get what I'm saying? So Rio de
Mhm.
Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Minas Gerais,
Mhm.
they have a lot of resources, and so you know that's where the capital of Brazil was at a certain point in history. And so we all know like capital cities or capital regions, those areas, right? Like they take the
Mhm.
resources from the other regions and put it in there. And that, you know, whereas, you know, then the Northeast region is neglected in a
Mhm.
way. But I love being here. The people are really nice. The Northeastern Brazil is where there's supposed to be the majority of the Black people. However, I was saying João Pessoa, it is not as much Black people as I thought that I would have encountered in João Pessoa. Like
Okay.
they're more so in Recife, which is a more southern, a larger city, and then also Salvador, which is like 15 hours away from here, well, maybe 20 hours on the bus, a lot more. And folks don't talk about it, but actually the southeastern region, Rio, Sao Paulo, and Minas Gerais, and Espírito Santo, those regions actually have a lot of Black people,
Mhm.
because of especially Minas, because of the gold, and the coffee
Mhm.
farms that they had in these regions. So those areas actually, when I go down and visit, I always see like people that look like me. Where like I be like,
Mhm.
oh, they black, black, they
Yeah.
blackity, black, 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 they black. But here in João Pessoa in the region, the folks are a lot more mixed. So it's a lot more mixed. So the
Mhm.
black people here are a little bit more fair skinned. The folks that do identify as black,
Mhm.
but they're here as well.
Mhm.
But it's really, I think for me, again, I have American privilege when it comes to like my identity as a black man, and that helps to facilitate a lot of things because I met a lot of some of the African folks because they have a lot of like French Africans here from Cameroon, from Congo, from
Mhm.
Benin that studied here because Brazil has this partnership with some of the African nations for them to study here. And so they like one of my friends She's an English teacher. She's from Cameroon. She grew up, she's from French-speaking Cameroon, but she went to a bilingual school there. And
Wow.
she's an English teacher, but she talked about not being able to get a job. And she's in her PhD program here at the university. And she talked about not really being able to get a job. And one part of the reason is because of, the color of the skin. That's the way that she believed. And I absolutely believe it, because I know that I have privilege because I'm American, but because they're African, it's a different dynamic. Like, they're not saying that they're not as valued as me, but their English, I'm sure her English is not as good as mine, or is not as valued as mine. But at the end of the day, she's completely bilingual. She's been speaking English all her life. You understand what I'm saying? Her
Mhm.
English is just as good as my English. She understands everything as well. So it's
Mhm.
just those sort of dynamics that do exist. But I think that
Yeah.
because I'm American, because I have this privilege, I also know that supersedes my Black identity a lot.
Yep. Yep. I so appreciate you touching on that, because just all the highs and the lows, like even just the fact that it is lonely, being away from your family sometimes. Um and also, for sure, I remember there was one time where I went so in Germany, it's called the Landratsamt, and there it's like foreigners, whatever. It's like where you have to go to get all your papers, your visas, all the things. And so I
Gotcha.
remember going in there, and there was a woman in there who I had gone to like a whole bunch of times. But I went in there to talk to her because, like, one of my friends and my neighbor and I, we were like making jewelry, and we made all this jewelry here. And so we're like, we don't have to sell this thing because this is too much jewelry. So I was like, I don't know if I can sell it like with my visa. So let me go check. So I went to go check, and the woman was so rude. And I was like, why is she so rude? Like, I've talked to her so many times, like about with my visa, every time I have to come back here. And so she was like, come in. And I was like, I could wait if you need me
Oh,
to.
wow.
She was like, no, come sit down. She was so rude. And so I'm talking to her, like, so I've been making jewelry with my neighbor and whatever. And something was like, pull out your passport. So I pulled out my passport to, like, show her my visa. And as soon as she saw that thing was an American passport, she said, oh, you're American. Oh, no, it's fine. You're okay. It was like she was talking to two different people
Instantly?
that quick. And I'm not one to be speechless. Literally, my mouth was like, I didn't even know what to say to her after that. I just put it back in and was like, okay. And then I just left. But it was at that moment that I realized, like, the African experience, the African American experience around the world is very different. So I
Completely
really
different.
appreciate you speaking to that. Like, the Black experience is not the Black experience.
Absolutely
It
not.
can really vary based on how you identify as a Black person and where you are too. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My friend that came to Brazil, like I told you, that one from UNC Charlotte, and
Mhm.
she spent time here in Brazil. And for her, she absolutely did not enjoy her experience in Brazil, because for her, she just saw Brazil as this place that it's good to visit, but not to live, because of bureaucracy. There's a lot of bureaucracy here. I forgot to mention that. So much
Mhm.
so. So, like, for her to go places like in Rio and see that the poor people were Black. You get what I'm saying? That when you go to countries and you see that the people at the bottom of the totem pole are Black people,
Mhm.
the poorest people are Black people,
Mhm.
and that takes a toll on somebody who comes
Yeah.
from like the United States. And then we see, like, we see Black wealth, we see Black middle class, and we see Black poor people. And so it's not relegated to a social, to one place within society. And so when you
Mhm.
come to like Latin America specifically, but in Brazil, you get what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
you feel that, and you see that, and she really didn't
Mhm.
like it. And even though Colombia, I know, has the same thing, and Ecuador has the same thing, for her it was much more salient in Brazil than it was in
Mhm.
Colombia and in Ecuador. But for her, this experience was just not what it had needed to be.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's really hard. I think also it's so interesting that you mentioned, like, about how you can, like, see the impact of COVID. That's crazy. Like, that you were like right there, right before it happened. And then, like, here, like, after it's been around some time and we've adjusted a little bit, but like visibly seeing that. And I think sometimes, and like, it has definitely impacted our lives in the US. There are so many people who are like in a different place financially than they were. Like, you read all these articles about engineers who are now delivering for DoorDash, but because it's not so visible sometimes, I think it's just so much easier to forget in the US, where
Mhm.
if we could really see the impact of it on our community too, I think it would be like staggering. But the fact that you can like visibly see there were not this many
Yeah,
people on these streets before is so
absolutely.
interesting. Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. So,
No problem.
last question for you. Do you have any regrets? Do you have any things that you wish you would have done differently? Any things that you're like, this was so amazing? Highs, anything. Just share any last thoughts for us.
Last thoughts. I think that one of the main things that when moving abroad is, well, one, the ability to travel. So the ability to travel in country. So I've traveled to lots of different places within Brazil since I've been here, which was a really enjoyable experience to get to know the different, because Brazil is as large as the United States. And so to go to the different regions, I went to the Foz de Iguaçu, which is one of the seven wonders of the world, which was
Mhm.
really, really nice to visit as well. So I don't regret anything. I even brought my parents to Brazil, to João Pessoa, and they were here for 9 days during
Wow.
the rainy season, of course, and so it rained, and so they couldn't enjoy it as much, and we didn't do as much. We were in the hotel, and the hotel only had one English channel, and it was Fox News. So they was not about that life. But
Yeah.
they appreciated the experience at the end of the experience, because my mom definitely was going through culture shock, because it's the first
Mhm.
time they've been to a place where the folks did not speak English, and they've been in a place
Mhm.
that long and not be able to communicate. And for us to be like the
Mhm.
tallest people around, because in the Northeastern Brazil, they're a little bit shorter. So now we're the tallest people around as
Mhm.
well. And so like all of these different factors that influence
So
their
people
experiences
staring
here.
and things like
And
that.
because when we're all walking together, you know how tall I am. And so my parents are like
Mhm.
5'11" respectively, right? And
Mhm.
so like it was just one of those things where people knew that we weren't from there based off how
Yeah.
tall that we were. And so and my parents, they didn't like the food too much, but that's
Mhm.
just because they were
Oh,
only
I
eating
love some
breakfast a
Brazilian
lot.
food.
Because my parents are country, remember they're country. So they were eat breakfast at the hotel and would eat so much because they don't know how to say no. And Brazilians, like, they eat, but they don't eat a lot for breakfast, right? Even if they have all this stuff out there, they're not going to eat a lot. But my parents, we America, breakfast is one of our most important meals. My daddy got a big plate. That man gonna stuff that thing, no? And so
Ah.
and so
Oh,
then they want
no.
to eat like this really nice dinner, but as you know, in Latin America, dinner is not the business, and breakfast is not the business. It is lunch that is the most important meal of the day. So they've been missing lunch the whole entire time, which is the best meal of the day.
Yes.
And I've also taken them to like one of the regional restaurants here, but they didn't think it was that good. And I think it's just culture shock. Like when you're in culture shock, that like the way the food tastes will be affected because you're
Yeah,
you're being
everything is
affected.
yes.
Yeah, you can't
Mhm.
get it. The last night I took them to a bougie restaurant, and that is the when they say, "Oh, this is the best meal we've had here." On this bougie food, right? Do you get? And I think it's because the atmosphere, the ambiance, they were in a place where they felt comfortable, and I think that might have all contributed
Mhm.
to them feeling, like this was a great experience, right? But
Mhm.
but that was a good experience for them, and so I'm glad for that. And hopefully, I want
Yeah.
to take them to Africa next year because I've been to Ghana already, and I want to take them to Ghana next year,
Nice.
hopefully. But I would say like going abroad, like the thing is that you just have to be open. That is the advice that I can give
Yes.
you is that you're going to need to be open and you're going to have to adjust your expectations because if you do not, you will be disappointed. You will be disappointed. And if you get disappointed and if you stay in that space, like you can easily become depressed. You can easily not have a good
Mhm.
time because your culture shock can take over and you start to feel
Mhm.
all different types of emotions because it's already your senses are already heightened because you're not understanding what's happening the majority of the time,
Mhm.
and then you have to understand context that you didn't even have to understand before, like the
Mhm.
safety, right? My friend came here and from another friend from UNC Charlotte, and we're going downtown, and she, she dressed in nice rings, earrings, jewelry. Take them off. I saw her
Yeah.
come out. I said, we got to take them off. I said, we're going to take the bus, take them off. We're going downtown. Like, you can't do that, right? And so, like, being more aware of like your context, but I would say just be open and adjust expectations, because that's what I've had to do. Because I've been disappointed here for a myriad of reasons, and the most that I could do is just readjust my expectations and just live in the moment and live in this experience, because this is the experience that I want, and it's not going to be all sunshine and butterflies. But at the end of the day, I think the positives outweigh the negatives. So
I love it. That is so real. That is so real. It's just different. It's different from what you've grown up with, what you've had, what you've experienced. So managing those expectations, that is so real. And I remember when I was in Sao Paulo, the first thing she was like, all y'all married people, take off them engagement rings and those wedding rings. Put them right here. We're going to put them right here. And this thing right here. But that
Sao
is
Paulo, they don't play any games. They don't
nope,
play any games. My friend
nope.
said that she came to Sao Paulo, like this one of the folks that I was working with in the organization that I was working with previously to come to Brazil, and she was like, her friend was here with her, and somebody passed by on a moto and yanked off her necklace. It was on the moto, on the cycle,
Yep.
yanked off the necklace.
You're not
Sao
catching that.
Paulo.
You are not catching that. That's awesome.
Ruthless.
I so appreciate it. I so appreciate your insights, your thoughtfulness, all the things that you shared. Thank you so, so much for your time today. It's been so great chatting with you. And so if anyone is interested in moving abroad and needs some help taking that leap, I'm here to support you in your personal journey. So head to my website, www.yourbestlifeabroad.com, for information on how to get started. So thank you again, Harry, for joining us today. And there is no time like the present to live your best life abroad. And we out.